Hi, I'm Michael, the director of the World Vapers Alliance. It's a great pleasure to talk to you today about our recent research paper on vaping and the gateway effect. Obviously, I would have liked to talk to you in person, but unfortunately, in times like this doesn't really work anymore. I'm from Austria and based in Vienna, so no need to worry about the strange accent anymore over the rest of the presentation. So we, as World Vapers Alliance, we represent consumers and advocate on behalf of vapers around the world to fight for our right to vape. Today, I would like to give you a short introduction what we do and who we are, but then mainly focus on the newest paper on several gateway myths. Obviously, there are way more arguments we hear all the time about gateway and vaping, but we focused especially on those four. So we tackle the issue of nicotine, smoking cessation, adolescents, and the role of the flavors and vaping. And I want to end with some policy recommendations. So let me start with a short introduction to the World Vapers Alliance. We amplify the voice of passionate vapers around the world and empower them to make a difference in their communities. In a second, I will show you how we do that and what we mean by this. But shortly to our structure. So we have two kinds of members, partners and individual members. Partners are national or regional vapers associations who can join our network, and we work together with them and help them and support them wherever we can. And the same applies to individual vapers who can also become members. We were founded in May 2020, so it's quite a new organization, but we still already got 19 vaping associations and more than 10,000 individual members at the moment. We focus mainly on those three goals. So we want to ensure that the voices of vapers are heard in policy discussions worldwide. We want to ensure that regulation is drafted with consumers' interests at heart. And we want to combat misinformation about vaping wherever we can. So very quickly, to ensure that our voices are heard, we try to build a broad and worldwide alliance of partner organizations. As you can see here, we currently have 20 partner organizations around the world. We support them wherever we can. We try to help them in their campaigns, and we also have our own campaigns running. I give you some examples a bit later, but in a very concrete way, we support our organizations with regulatory monitoring around the world. So we keep track wherever new regulations are proposed or coming up and help the national organizations to combat them or to make them aware and campaign in favor or against certain policies. Moreover, we help with campaigns, so social media campaigns, but also offline campaigns. And especially in the online world and nowadays, that's very important. And we try to amplify our voices together. Yeah. So the second part I already mentioned is to ensure that regulation is drafted with vapers' interests at heart, which unfortunately nowadays means mainly fighting against bad regulation. So we basically focus on availability, affordability, and variety. So we have, for example, at the moment, a campaign in Europe running about the European Beating Cancer Plan. There we say back vaping beat cancer because we are convinced if the European Union would include vaping as a prevention tool, it would help millions of smokers to quit smoking via vaping. Affordability, there it's mainly tax issues, especially in South America. We are working together with our partners because there are many proposals to increase taxes on e-cigarettes and liquids, which obviously is a very bad thing to make it more expensive. then less people will switch from smoking to vaping. And variety, that's also a big issue in the US with the vaping bans. So we are currently started a campaign in California to help to get enough signatures to get the flavor ban in a ballot referendum. Also in the Netherlands, it's quite unfortunate that they plan to ban flavors. Normally, the Netherlands is seen as a country with sensible regulations in those kind of areas. So we are afraid of a knock-on effect if they go through with it. So we started a pretty big campaign there as well, actually. And the third pillar of our goals is combat misinformation about vaping. I think I don't really need to tell you how hard that is, and that the media jumps more easily on bad news about vaping. I just Googled vaping and those kind of headlines come up. So it's a very tough environment, as we all know. So we do everything we can to combat this. Obviously, we do it with our own media activities and try to get as much as possible our voice out there and try to give readers, but also policymakers a kind of a different view on certain issues. I put here some examples, you can see them. But also part of this combating misinformation is that we conduct our own research papers. And one of those research papers is Vaping and the Gateway Myth. We just published it 2 weeks ago, and as already mentioned shortly, we tried to tackle 4 very commonly made arguments against vaping or in the area of the gateway effect from vaping to smoking. So we looked at nicotine per se and what effect it does have, smoking cessation, teens and young users, and flavors. Let me start with the nicotine argument. So we commonly hear nicotine is a nerve poison, nicotine is highly addictive, and therefore we should do everything we can to prevent the people use it. So we looked at this, but I want to first get a little sidestep because we always hear these arguments about health with vaping in general. Most of you will know those kind of things, but from anti-vaping organizations, we a lot of times, as you know, are criticized that there is not conclusive evidence, not enough studies, the studies who are there are not enough. So it's always the same things. So we try to go the way and trust the governmental agencies and mainly use their advice. And as you can see, a couple of governments already established that vaping is less harmful, that it's good as a cessation tool. So we always try to use this as an anchor for combating this misinformation, because it's always for me it's always quite surprising that people don't trust those governmental organizations either. So probably there are other issues in the background this anti-vaping organizations have. One important thing which needs to be stressed here, you can see it's always a comparison. So you always see less harmful than smoking, a small fraction of risk compared to smoking, stuff like that. So that's what we always emphasize as well. It's always about relative harm to smoking, because one of the biggest misconceptions is that anti-vaping organizations don't believe us that that vaping is a cessation tool. I put here a picture from our Back Vaping Beat Cancer campaign. So that's mainly related to cancer, and you can see it's only a tiny fraction of risk what vaping has compared to cigarettes. So that's at the beginning, I didn't really understand why, but you can hear 95% less harmful in 2 ways. We hear, oh, that's great, a less harmful way of consuming nicotine for people who can't quit smoking. But the anti-vapers hear, oh, there is still risk. which obviously there is a small risk, but we always need to make the comparison to smoking cigarettes, and then we can see this risk is neglectable, and we should encourage people to switch. This makes it quite clear, I would say. So then to nicotine per se. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, so we ask our scientific advisor, Professor Bernd Meyer, a toxicologist from the University of Graz, to help us with that, and to assess the effects of nicotine when consumed with vaping. And as you can see, he came to quite clear conclusion that this nerve poisoning only occurs in an event of a massive overdose, and normally with regular vaping you can't achieve those kind of levels or nicotine levels. Also, from a pure medical point of view, the addiction itself is not the problem, but the harmful effects of the tobacco smoke and the toxins in there. So the clinical effects of nicotine per se, he compared to caffeine, and it's clinically harmless. It doesn't lead to serious illness or mortality, just nicotine per se. It's more about the toxins which are in the cigarettes. Then also to the argument that nicotine is highly addictive, we asked him to give his opinion on it, and it's quite clear that it's not nicotine per se alone. It's always a combination of different things which make people addicted. So it's also the other ingredients in tobacco smoke, but also the smoking ritual. So the classic one is smoking and drinking a cup of coffee. In general, there are different studies, all the studies I quote, you find all the links and all the sources in our paper. So if you want to look at them or have question about it, I encourage you to download the paper, and there you'll find all the links. I just don't want to quote each study here. So in general, there are many studies which say that nicotine in e-cigarettes is less addictive than compared to tobacco smoke. And in general, I mean, for us as consumers, it's always quite baffling that nicotine in nicotine patches or nicotine gums is not an issue, but when consuming it with a vape device, it suddenly becomes a problem. So that's a very strange argumentation for me. I personally am the perfect example who couldn't do it with other sorts of tools or patches and gums and stuff like that. I still use a little bit of nicotine, but yeah, it's also the smoking ritual which is that good. And if the nicotine per se would be the problem, we would see millions of addicted people to gums and patches as well. But we clearly see quite the opposite, that smokers are not satisfied with those alternatives, and they are seeking to get other alternatives such as vaping. So this argument, just the nicotine as a gateway to smoking, doesn't really stand the ground empirically, but also not medically. So here I want to show an example of a government agency which has a very sensible approach towards it, the National Health Service, the NHS in UK, which also states very clearly in their report using e-cigarettes to stop smoking. So they actively endorse smokers to switch to e-cigarettes, which is already good. But about nicotine, they say it's relatively harmless, and the other toxins in the tobacco smoke are way worse. So it's still a good thing if people switch from smoking to vaping. Nicotine replacement therapy, where they include e-cigarettes, luckily is proven for many years and a safe treatment. So the scaremongering about nicotine per se is from our point of view, false, and those kind of agencies should should not engage in scaremongering current smokers not to switch to vaping because of health risk or something like that, because compared to cigarettes, they always improve their health and they are less harmful. The second argument we wanted to tackle is that we always hear that vaping itself is a gateway to smoking and not very successful as a cessation tool. Obviously, we know millions of vapers proved already the opposite, and that's not anecdotal evidence anymore, because we are so many who could quit this bad habit with vaping. So it's always quite baffling to me that people don't really accept the fact that for a lot of people, the other ways of quitting, cold turkey or nicotine replacement therapies, don't work. But vaping works, and it seems like they can't accept that. So we try to analyze this and come up with the actual facts about it. So many countries, especially the ones who are open towards vaping, record low levels of daily smokers, which is obviously a good thing, but rarely celebrated. We found a high correlation between the popularity of vaping and the decline of smoking. And this argument that non-smokers are pushed to smoking by e-cigarettes or as a e-cigarettes can be a stepping stone into it, is also not supported by the actual numbers. So here you can see a very interesting comparison between England, the US, and Australia. All of these countries see falling tendencies of smoking rates, but the interesting part is the rate of the decline. The black line is 2013, where more or less vaping became popular, and back then the US and especially England had a very open attitude towards vaping. So while the smoking rates from this day on declined in the US and the UK about 1%, Australia only saw a fall of 0.3%, so way lower, 1% per year versus 0.3 per year. This already indicates that vaping plays a vital role in people turning off cigarettes or as a smoking cessation tool, because Australia has a very harsh approach towards vaping. And you can see the empirical data proves the English way or the US way, at least back then. Now the tide is a little bit turning, unfortunately, here, but still, the data shows quite an astonishing correlation between popularity of e-cigarettes and openness in the governmental regulation of it, and the falling smoking rates. Here is another example from the UK, probably the most friendly country for vapers. You can also see, again, a record low level of smokers and a sharp rise of former smokers using e-cigarettes, which also shows that more and more smokers are switching to e-cigarettes or to vaping. And it seems to be a highly successful cessation tool. The third argument we always hear normally at this moment: what about the children? What about the kids? Vaping is a gateway to smoking for young people, and there is a youth vaping epidemic. Things like that are normally, after you made all the other arguments, then the gateway argument and young people comes into play. So we really wanted to have a look on it as well. And not surprisingly to the vaping community, the actual numbers and the facts are quite the opposite. So we found that the vast majority of adolescents who try vaping already smoked or do smoke. So it's about 80% of young vapers who try vaping, they smoke beforehand already. So it's not a for them, it's not a gateway to smoking, but they just try another form of nicotine delivery. Also then the regular vaping, which is a very important definitional difference. So the numbers normally they ask young people, did you use an e-cigarette in the last 30 days? But doesn't make a difference of the amount, how often they use it, which is highly problematic, because obviously it's different if you try one time at a party, or if you're a daily user, it's a difference. But most of those statistics, they don't do that. So we had a closer look on those statistics, and regular vaping with young people is very rare. It's about between 0.5 and 1-2% in different countries. Also, the smoking rates for adolescents are still sharply falling, so no sign of the gateway. And we looked at a couple of meta studies who analyzed the gateway effect in vaping, and they found that most of those studies are very biased because they don't take into account other activities such as or life circumstances such as anxiety, education, household income, peer pressure, or what if parents are smokers or not, things like that. So we need to be very careful with those numbers and always have a very, very close look on it. Unfortunately, the media doesn't always do that. So we hear always the high numbers without any depth. And we wanted to show it here. So just looking at the smoking rates, again, very sharp decline. At some point, if vaping would be a gateway to smoking, at some point we should see higher smoking rates quite logically, but we don't do it anywhere. We don't see it anywhere. I also put on a chart here for older people, I mean, young adults. For them, back then it was still allowed to vape, so it's legal, but we even see there sharp declines of smoking rates, except for Australia again, who is very harsh on vaping. So the same which applies to adults seems to apply for adolescents as well. So we recommended that the governments and public health official, they should tackle those other areas, anxiety, education, household income, things like that, because one study showed that adolescents who in generally are not satisfied with their life, that they tend to more riskier behavior no matter what it is. So the sensible way would be to tackle the underlying issues and not banning or regulating vaping for adults as well. Seems sometimes that it's just an excuse for banning a product politicians or public health groups don't want to see in general, or to avoid to tackle the real issues and harder issues like educational problems and low income for many families. The last argument, which always seems to be a driving issue when we talk about vaping and the gateway, is the role of flavors. At this point, I only want to go over the findings very quickly, because we already did a whole research paper just on flavors as well, and there will be another presentation about the flavors, which goes into the gateway argument as well. So just very quickly. So the arguments we always hear are that flavors attract mainly young people, and for adults they don't really matter, so we should ban them to protect the kids. Flavors are therefore an on-ramp toward smoking, and flavor bans are, as a consequence, beneficial for public health. So as you can see here, we found that flavors are not the main reason why kids start to vape, but they are a very important part when they are vaping. So the number one reason why people start to vape is curiosity. And especially with kids, there it's over 70%, and they don't start because of the flavor or the taste of the e-cigarette. It's curiosity, and probably we won't be able to outlaw curiosity. The better way would be to enforce existing laws correctly. We already have bans for underage people to buy vaping products, but also flavors and liquids. So we need better law enforcement and not bans for adult people. We found that the flavors are very essential to keep people away from cigarettes. Many adults use them, and even the likelihood to quit smoking is higher when you use flavors. And obviously, like prohibition always does, banning flavors has very bad unintended consequences as well. So here you can see, even for adults, more than 2/3 of the adults use some kind of flavor, which is non-tobacco. And Yale study found that vapers who use flavors are 2.3 times more likely to quit once and for all. So flavors play an important part also for adults. So if a flavor ban comes into effect, people basically only have 3 choices they can make. One is return to smoking. We found that 7.7 million vapers might be going back to or be pushed back to smoking in the United States alone. This is the population of Los Angeles and Chicago combined, so very detrimental for public health. And the other 2 options they have, if they don't want to go back to smoking, is to rely on the black market. Obviously, there is a very bad idea for public officials to push people back to black markets. We all know there are shady actors in those kind of markets. There's no oversight, no product control or quality control. So flavor bans have actually, for the life of many people, very bad effects. And the third option, especially in the US or in Europe, is to just buy it other legal jurisdictions. We saw that in Massachusetts and the neighboring states, sales went up. So it doesn't really make a difference overall. And the goals of the public officials are not reached with this. But as I said, you can hear more about this in another talk about why flavors matter. So in general, here are our findings again. We think, or evidence shows as well, that vaping is a gateway out of smoking and not vice versa, which is always claimed. E-cigarettes help adults to quit smoking. Vaping is not as popular with young adults as many people claim. And banning flavors won't solve anything. Quite contrary, it has very bad unintended consequences and effects. So that's our main findings, and obviously we hope that we can combat some of the misinformation which is out there, because there are many challenges ahead of us as a vaping community altogether. Sorry, I forgot our recommendations first. So we always advocate to politicians and lawmakers and public health officials to commit to the general concept of harm reduction and to endorse cigarettes as one way to achieve this, and actively encourage smokers to switch to e-cigarettes like the United Kingdom, Canada, or New Zealand already did or are doing so. Therefore, we need to guarantee access to vaping products for adults, of course. As already mentioned, affordability and variety are highly important for that, that people switch to vaping. And of course, we need information for current smokers about the possibilities and the potential of harm reduction of from e-cigarettes for themselves. So we are doing this because we have a lot of challenges in front of us. Currently, our main activities and campaigns are on the flavor ban in California. We just started the campaign there to help there to gather signatures. And the flavor ban in the Netherlands, as already mentioned, would be a very, very bad example for other European but international countries. So we are pushing very hard against this one as well. The European Beating Cancer Plan is a plan by the European Commission where they want to tackle or fight or eradicate even the problem of cancer. As we all know, smoking-induced cancer is one of the leading causes. So we started a campaign, Back Vaping, Beat Cancer, where we try to include vaping in this plan as a harm reduction tool for current smokers. First of all, because we are convinced it would help millions of people to quit smoking, but in overall, it would also be a good example for next year's big challenges, the European Tobacco Productive Directive and the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which are coming up. So that will be very challenging and very, very crucial points for the future of vaping in general, I would say. So therefore, I would encourage you and invite you to join our network as a vaping group, but also as an individual. You can find everything on our website, worldvapersalliance.com. It's free and super easy. Just have a look on our website or contact me directly. And we are always here to help, and we always welcome new members as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to talk to you soon in person. Thanks again. Bye-bye.